We're doing this interview in the middle of the Windrush scandal. The Home Secretary has just resigned and been replaced by Sajid Javid. And I guess the government is currently hoping that the whole thing is going to die down right now. How have you felt through this?
That could be me.
He said that too, interestingly.
Well,
the Home Secretary.
yeah. A couple of weeks ago, when it started, I actually said that I think that the Home Secretary is going to go and she will be replaced by somebody who's black or Asian. Now, that may be me being cynical, but it's happened because that is a good answer, you know, if somebody's kind of got a personal connection to it. But if you are not born in Britain or you have relatives that are not born in Britain, it could be you. But how did I feel? I wasn't really that shocked. Look, The Guardian have been running the story for about 6 months. The Voice newspaper has been doing it for about 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
we've been doing it for 4 or 5 months and sporadically, but generally the media haven't really touched it.
No. And I for years I've known of people who were raised here, gone back to the Caribbean, usually for a funeral or something, and have trouble getting back. The ones I've known personally have managed to get back, but you know, it's been a bit of a struggle. They've had to kind of show that they are from here. And I think, you know, head should roll. And you know, the Prime Minister, I think at the moment she's getting away with it, and I don't know how long she's going to last. But my fear is that we have a Grenfell Tower scenario in that she makes a lot of promises. She says she's going to do an inquiry, and then it goes off the radar. Because look at the people from Grenfell Tower; they're still living in bed and breakfasts and hotels. And
but as this has unfolded, I mean, have you felt more angry about it? Have you felt that rage? I mean, you know, similarly, I've known about this for years. I've known about the particular stories for months, and that we've been covering. But it's only when it suddenly comes to a head and everybody starts talking about it, and you suddenly focus in on it as the big issue of the moment, that you become really enraged by what's happening.
I feel angry when I hear Theresa May like just fudging questions and not answering questions directly and not taking responsibility. What I have felt recently, and I don't know if this is just me getting older, but it's happened to me a lot recently, is that I get very tearful when I listen to or read or hear the individual stories. That really does make me cry. I'm thinking of some now, and you know, I'm getting very emotional because I don't know if you know that, like, somebody died. The doctors say they can't see the reason for death. You know, it's unexplained. Yes. I say he died of a broken heart. He lost his job. He lost his house. He lost his friend because he started begging. You know, and I'm convinced he just gave up. You know, in lots of languages they have a word for this, but the nearest thing we have for it in the English language is a broken heart. I heard of a man the other day who was arrested, and he was let go, then he was arrested again. He was arrested on Monday and told he was going to be deported on the Wednesday. He got to his wife, and she managed to get their life savings to get a lawyer to liberate him from the airport. His life savings was £700. They had to give it to a lawyer. People that have gone back to, in the case I know, Jamaica, to a funeral, and still haven't been able to get back to Britain after months.
This is a friend of yours?
Yeah, just a friend of mine. So, you know, these things, I'm probably past being angry. I just want something done about it. And I think even as we sit here, and we're interested in politics, that's why we're here. But the majority of people that this are affecting is not interested in politics. They just want to get home, or they just want to be able to move freely. They just want something done. So I think it's almost a waste of time intellectualizing about it.
But how does it make you feel as a Briton? Because it's very easy. My parents came over in this generation too. It's very easy to know about their stories, to live your life, to be successful, to have a nice home, and to think that Britain has come a long way and everything's very different.
Yeah.
And not to be abused openly in the street routinely, although that happens a little bit again. And what I wonder is whether it's made you feel, I mean, I've long felt that we've been going backwards in all sorts of ways, and I wonder whether you feel that too.
I have to go back to my memories of growing up in Britain and there being no-go areas for me and people like me. I can name parts of London and Birmingham which we just couldn't go to. I had my first racist attack when I was 8 years old. Somebody slapped me with a brick at the back of my head as they were riding past on a bicycle and said, "Go home, you black bastard." I didn't understand what they meant, you know. When he said go home, I went home. I said, "Oh, I'm going home," you know. When I got home, I said, "Mum, why did he tell me to go home?" And she had to explain to me that there were people that didn't like me because of the colour of my skin.
And that this wasn't home for them.
And that they didn't think that this was my home. Yeah. Coming out of clubs and encountering groups of racist skinheads that are ready to fight you. Well, sometimes they invade the clubs or invaded the clubs. And then having police that were openly racist, you know, those days are gone. You know, we have to admit that. I really get frustrated when people say nothing's changed. A lot has changed, even in the jobs that we do. I can remember a time when our complaint was there were no black or Asian people on television. I remember as a kid, we only saw Americans. So things have changed. During the Brexit vote, for the first time, I think since probably the late 80s, I had people calling me, and I'm going to say the N-word. I usually say the full word. I don't know what the policy is here.
You can say whatever you want here.
But I've had people calling me a nigger and telling me to go home. Somebody said, the Eastern Europeans are leaving and you're next. And it was really interesting because this was like 2 or 3 weeks before the vote and 2 or 3 weeks after. And then it just stopped. And this is in my little rural Ido in Lincolnshire. And I remember one day I was telling somebody about this on the street, you know, during this time, a white person, and this person said, "This is terrible, Benjamin. I didn't think this could happen in our village." And as she said that, somebody drove past and said, "Go home, nigger," and shouted to this woman, this like old English lady, "I don't think he's ever left Lincolnshire, and you die too, nigger lover," you know. So, and my immediate thought was, wow, it was a throwback to what I used to hear before. So there is still a kind of undercurrent of that type of racist in existence in the country. But I still don't think it's like it was before. But what I feel now with the Windrush situation is that I don't feel safe. I think you go to lots of people who have been moved out of a country or been expelled or whatever, and if you say to them, go back 20 years, do you think this could have ever happened? They'll say, no. I lived in Yugoslavia for 2 years. And the Serbs and the Croats all lived together. And I don't think any of them ever thought there's going to be a time when they would have to run for their lives. We just don't know. And I think, you know, if something really drastic happened in the country, I think there are a lot of people that wouldn't count us as British. Doesn't matter about us being born here or not. I think that's a long way away. I mean, it may never happen.
That's what I mean. It's easy to forget the underlying racism and division in Britain because people don't come up to you in the street and abuse you the way they used to when we were kids. But what the Windrush scandal has perhaps exposed is the underlying prejudices, the institutional racism, the structural racism, all of that. And that's what's leading to what you're saying, the fear that this could all come back. Not just come back, but be worse.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that when this happened to me in my village, when a lot of people in the village heard about it, I mean, this is a really small village, a really quiet place. They rallied around me.
I'm sure.
They really, I mean, they volunteered to put up security for me. I suggested that I might leave, absolutely no way, Benjamin, please, you're not leaving here. And there's something about when people, this is what's happened in the Windrush case. I think it's also happened with the the Stephen Lawrence case and Doreen Lawrence, that people looked at Doreen and said, this is the average, I use inverted commas, housewife here. She wasn't a political radical or anything like that, you know. That could have been my son, black or white. And I think when a lot of people saw Doreen Lawrence, they identified with her and therefore supported the campaign to get her killers put behind bars. And I think the same thing with the Windrush thing. There's a lot of people who are not interested in black politics at all, but they look at these elderly, on the whole, a lot of them are elderly people who have just gone out the country for shopping to France or something, and then can't get back in the country. And their heart goes out to them, you know. People in my village who have met my mother is, definitely Windrush generation. She didn't actually come on the Windrush, she came on a couple of ships afterwards. And they know her as Benjamin's mum, and she's lovely, and she comes to the church and she gets us to sing along in a Jamaican style. When they realised that that could have been my mother, the whole village became kind of very militantly interested in what was happening with this whole Windrush fiasco.
How did your mother come here? She saw the posters.
She was very typical of many people at the time. She was walking down the street, she looked up, she saw a poster. She was with her sister, actually. And they read the poster, come to England where the streets are paved with gold, there are jobs here waiting for you, we are the mother country, we welcome you, etc. She said to her sister, do you want to go? And her sister said, too damn cold, I'm not going anywhere near that country. She said, I'll give it a try. Now in the Caribbean, you don't necessarily get raised by your parents. She was very much raised by her uncle. This is just a thing they do sometimes. So she went to her uncle and said, I fancy going. And her uncle gave her the money, and she came to England, originally to Sheffield, and worked as a cleaner. And then somebody said they could get her a job nursing, which is what she always wanted to do, in Birmingham. So she went to Birmingham. I started to go back to Jamaica just to visit. And I would see my cousins, they look like me. Them just sound very Jamaican, them sound very different from the Benjamin Zephaniah, because him come from England, we Jamaican. But they look like me, they move like me. And then I'd see them and I'd play football or whatever, then I'd go back to England and I'd come back next year and they're dead. Either in a hurricane or my family do a lot of fishing. So they go out on the boats and they just never return, something like that. And it always struck me that, here I am in a relatively safe country. We don't have hurricanes here. We have a bit of wind and we call it a hurricane. But they were kind of, every time I went back, there was some disaster, natural disaster, and it was so normal for them. And I thought,
to lose a member of their family.
Yeah, especially the men, because they were doing very dangerous work. And so I always was aware of kind of how lucky I was to be born in Britain,
Which makes it all the more shocking that you would say now that you don't feel safe.
I so love this country. It's amazing, and as a young Rasta, I don't know if you understand the whole Rastafarian thing, is that we want to go to Africa. And as soon as I was able to kind of travel to Jamaica and travel to Africa, I realized how English I was and how much I love this country.
Why aren't you in politics?
Because I've seen politicians and I've been very close to some of them, and I've seen the compromises they have to make, and I can understand sometimes you have to make compromises. Caring about politics and human rights issues is different from kind of, running a surgery and all the kind of things that an MP and a politician has to do.
But you are all about change, aren't you? You've been all about change in your own life, and you are now working with young people all the time to help them change theirs. And you could conceivably do it on a much bigger stage.
I've watched really, especially in South Africa and in the New Labour project as well. Both times I remember seeing pictures of the first black government in South Africa and Tony Blair's Labour government, the first one. I remember looking at them and going, gosh, I know half of them. And a lot of them were good people, but I saw them kind of get beaten down by the system. I got to tell you something which will it's going to upset people on the left and it's going to upset people on the right. And I think it's because it's completely misunderstood. And with all respect, I think you misunderstand it. I might be wrong, but you can challenge me on it. I'm an anarchist. I believe this needs to be torn down. I believe we need to start again. I don't believe that we need governments and the kind of models that we have. But I'm also aware that we're not going to achieve that now. I can give you examples of anarchism all over the world. I know places in Asia, I know places in Africa where they see nothing of big government. They see nothing of the government at all, where they police themselves, look after themselves.
Give me an example.
Well, there's tribes I was in Kenya not so long ago, and I was talking to some people there on the border, and I said to them, I was doing a Radio 4 program actually, and I said, do you feel Tanzanian or Kenyan? And they went, well, we're just here. I said, the border's there, and we cross it every day. There's no government there. They police themselves. They live relatively in harmony. They do have disputes, but they sort it out themselves. I've seen examples in rural China where they don't see government at all. Everybody talks about the power of the communist government and all that stuff. They don't see government officials at all.
And do you say that's never going to happen here because it can't happen on a big scale? It can happen in a village on a border of Tanzania, but it can't happen for the whole of Britain.
Well, no, I think it can, because you don't think of the whole of Britain. You think of individual areas, think of what works for them. So what works in Lincolnshire may not be the way it should work in Devon or whatever.
And for you, does anarchy literally mean no law, no authority?
It means no government. It means no authority. It means we take responsibility. We police ourselves. It means no police force. It means people may serve a kind of police service, but not a police force. And so
what if you think I should be shot for turning up late at school?
Pardon?
In a world where there are no rules, there's no police, there's no nothing, what's to stop individuals having crazy thoughts about what should be a consequence or a rule or an action? Who stops them?
That's a ridiculous question. We would have ways, and it depends on the society and the local culture and all that stuff. We would have ways of policing ourselves. And of course, we would have to think about people with, I hesitate to say this because I'm not sure if it's politically correct, with mental illness, because somebody that says, somebody should be shot for turning up late to work, they can't be of their sound mind. And we would have ways of healing those people and dealing with them. And it may be, in some cases, a way of isolating them.
So you think you can have society within anarchy?
Yes. But it's not a kind of top-down society, and that's the difference. So, and the problem is that we can't imagine it. We find it very difficult to imagine, because even the way that you're dealing with it now, you're kind of asking questions that come from the education you have and the systems that you've seen. But the whole idea of the nation states and a lot of other things that we take for granted are relatively new. I believe that a long time ago, not only did we govern ourselves in a state which would be called anarchy, but in terms of the way that we perceived our spirituality, didn't need a church, didn't need a preacher. We just did it through meditation and getting in touch with our God ourselves. And we've lost the confidence to do that. So we delegate the responsibility to the priest, to the church, and we've lost the confidence to run our own lives. So we delegate that responsibility to politicians. Now, I know that's going to sound crazy to a lot of people because I know they can't imagine it. But we see pockets of it all the time. When Grenfell Tower went up in flames, the government left the people alone. There was nobody there. They organised everything. They organised money. The only thing from the state that you really saw was the firefighters. But in terms of organising people, getting people a bed, finding relatives and all that kind of stuff, it was anarchy, but it was beautiful anarchy.
And do you want to do anything to try and achieve that? Or do you just think it's not possible?
I'd like to have a revolution. But everybody's too busy shopping. That's the culture we live in now. And I've seen it all over the world. I've seen, people in China, and if they get more freedom, and what's the first thing they do? Go shopping.
You do spend a lot of time in China, do you? How come?
I kind of partly lived there, you could say. I never spent a hard winter there. I'm not that tough. But my love of martial arts
Just
took
took
me
you
there, yeah. And I do a lot of writing there because I don't get recognized that much. Although I'm on a plane basically, and a guy comes up to me, a Chinese guy, and he says, "Can I have your autograph?" So I sign my autograph, and he goes, No, you're Bob Marley. And I go, "No, I'm not Bob Marley. Bob Marley died a long time ago." And he's insisting that I sign Bob Marley. Then another Chinese guy comes up and he goes, "What are you talking about? This is not Bob Marley. How dare you? This is Kofi Annan." I go, "What? Kofi Annan?" Seriously. That's even worse, I can see some resemblance to Bob Marley, but none to Kofi Annan.
Right. Okay. But but you like China. You like going there,
Well,
which is about as far away from anarchy as you could possibly get.
It can be tough, but I don't know about far away. He is far away from anarchy, I'm one of the few people you may meet, well, maybe I'm not, that spent time in North Korea. Believe it or not, there's some things I liked about North Korea. It's far away from anarchy,
How much time have you spent there?
Well, I've been there a couple of times, and I probably exaggerated a bit, altogether about 6 months.
Well, that's a long time.
That's a long time for North Korea, because it's very, if you want all your modern stuff, and I'm a vegan, it's very, very tough. But I enjoyed being there. I wanted to see it for myself, and it taught me a lot. And I'll tell you something. I was born in Britain, and I've lived here most of my life. Capitalist country and all that stuff. And, I've survived in this capitalist system. But I didn't really understand capitalism until I went to China. That's raw, real capitalism. It's like everybody's capitalistic. Most people are embarrassed when you call them a communist. And even there was a debate in the political classes about getting rid of the title communist, and they kind of keep it almost for nostalgic reasons, because there are some people that are alive that remember the old struggle and all that kind of stuff. Because it's all about making money. It's all about making money. And who knows, the North Koreans might be next.
But what's drawn you to these authoritarian states, whether it's North Korea, Yugoslavia under Tito, or China, if you're an anarchist at heart?
Because I want to see for myself. I don't believe what I hear here. And I know you tell a lot of it, you know what I mean? But I listen to it and I think, right, what do I make of it? Do I want to go and investigate this myself? When I was a teenager, early 20s, it was the Cold War. And we were told that the Russians, and what did I do? I got on a plane and went to Russia. There's one thing I learned about my travel, and one of the reasons why I go to places that are authoritarian and some other places that are very capitalistic, is because I'm interested in people and how people live from day to day. And one thing I've found that we all have in common is that we all have politicians that claim they represent us. And we're all frustrated because politicians don't represent us. Doesn't matter where you are. That happens in Iran, that happens in Pakistan, that happens in China, that happens in Britain.
But to be an anarchist in the way you've described it, a society in which people just organise themselves and do good, you've got to have a lot of faith in human beings and people, and different kinds of people.
Yeah, I do have faith in people. I really do. I know it's not scientific, but I do believe in the end, good will overcome evil.
You don't believe the tyranny of the majority would always mean, minorities oppressed?
No. I believe if you give people power, they can come tyrannical. But this is not about giving people power. This is about giving people responsibility. I spoke on radio once about fighting the National Front in the streets of London. And a guy wrote to me. And he said he remembers fighting me, in Stratford Broadway. And he's now a Buddhist monk. And you could literally see the tears on the page because he turned his life around. It's one of the reasons why I hate the death penalty. I always think you should leave a little time for redemption, a little space to turn your life around. And when I see disaffected white youth in this country who are angry at me and the foreigners and all that stuff, I really want to talk to them because I know that the things that make them angry make me angry, and I know that if me and them got together, we could attack whatever you want to call it, the people that are making us angry. Again, I used to have a poem that used to go, if you get uptight and you want to fight them, not me. If you check out the scene and things don't right, see them, not me. I came, I saw, I live here, and I have my tribulation to bear. If you're getting uptight and you want to fight them, not me. If you live in a kitchen and you can't afford chicken, blame them, not me. If the taxi pays high and you live up in the sky, see them, not me. I come from afar, but I live here, and all I want is an equal share. If you're getting uptight and you really want fight them, not me. It's a long poem, I won't do all of it. But, you know, and I used to perform that to people and try and say to them, look, we can unite. I remember back living in East London when racists were moving into East London. And I remember hearing some kids say to me, you're taking all our good housing, you know, you're taking all our jobs. And I took them to show them how the Bengali people were living. And they were like, this is terrible, you know, look at the jobs they were doing. They were, this is outrageous. Come on, unite with us and fight for a better life for all of us. You know, divide and rule is like one of the most kind of simplest, but one of the most effective strategies that our oppressors have.
And that's going on right now, isn't it?
It's going
Divide
on right
and rule
now.
all over again.
All over again. You know, there's enough food and enough resources in this world and in this country for all of us. It's just about how it's distributed. And I should also say, if anybody listening to this and saying that I'm sounding like an old Marxist or something like that, no, I don't think that, you know, the day's gonna come when the workers put down the tools. And although I'm an anarchist, I think if we rebuild a new kind of society, you or me don't have a name for it yet. We don't have a name for it yet. We have to really reimagine the future. And
can you have private property in anarchism?
yes.
You can have your house in Lincolnshire that's yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having said that, you know, I'd be willing to give it up. I'd be willing to sacrifice all my stuff for a more equal society. No problem at all. I got no problem with that at all. I've seen real poverty and I've seen real wealth. And I don't really want any of them. So I'm happy to be somewhere floating around the middle. But if it made a more equal society, I'm happy to give up what I've got. I find it difficult giving up chocolate, but, you know, and sex. But
you're sort of a polymath now. I mean, you know, you're the professor who left school with nothing, the poet, activist, but you're also an actor. And tell me about Peaky Blinders.
Well, I'm quite proud of Peaky Blinders. I mean, my part in it is only cameo. They keep telling me I shouldn't say only cameo, but I don't appear in every episode. And I was the first person cast for the series. Well, we've had many series now, but I was the first person cast because when Stephen Knight was writing it, the character that's known as Jeremiah Jesus is based on a real character, and he knew that he wanted me to play that part. So my character is based on a Caribbean guy who fought with a troop or battalion of soldiers that were from Birmingham. They, in the First World War, they went back to Birmingham. He went back to the Caribbean, but he missed his brother so much that he came back to Birmingham. And he started kind of hanging out on the streets and he became this kind of mad preacher. So I play him. But it's really good because they take historical facts and then they kind of fictionalize them. The IRA, people think of the IRA like the 70s and 80s, but the IRA were big in Birmingham in the 1920s and 30s. And the Irish accent kind of heavily influences the Brummie accent. So we take fact and we kind of make fiction from it. And it's really popular. When we did the first series, we were like, is anybody really going to get this? A drama set in the 1920s, 1930s, gangster in Birmingham.
It makes Birmingham look glamorous.
You know, but Birmingham is glamorous, by the way. And it took off, you know, and I'm really proud of it.
You've done your autobiography at sort of almost the age of 60.
I'm 60 now.
You are 60 now. Why did you wait until 60? And what are you going to do with the second half of your life?
I'm going to live to be 120. No, I started writing it about 6 years ago on the understanding that I didn't have a contract, I didn't have any money, didn't have a deal. I wanted to take my time and write it because I didn't want to write another one.
You'll have to, won't you? You've got at least another 20, 30 years.
I don't know. Who knows? But I wanted it to be a kind of, not just my story, but a kind of political document of the time, the things I was going through. Because when I got kicked out of school at 13, the teacher said you're going to end up dead or doing a life sentence. And there's a part of me that kind of believed her. So when I started to get involved in crime, I started to see people dying and going for long sentences. And I kind of thought, I'm not that special, so maybe I'm going to end up this way. So I dedicate the book to myself because I said I didn't think I was going to live to see 30, and now I'm 60. I've doubled it, and I find that quite amazing because I really thought I wasn't going to last. And this really makes me think of what some young people are going through today, which is in the news right now. Young people who are 14, 15, and 16, sometimes younger, killing each other with guns and knives on the streets of Birmingham and Manchester and London. I really think that that could be me. That could have been me. Some people say, send in more police and this, that, and the other. Tougher sentences. We don't really fear the sentence, You
fear getting killed.
Fear getting killed. Exactly. Fear getting killed. And I don't know if anybody really understands, well, some people do, of course, what it's really like to live in this postcode and to have I was going to say a guy, but gangs in all the surrounding postcodes that want to kill you. And you don't trust the police. And you think the police may want to kill you as well because there's deaths in custody and things like this. Who are you going to go to? You carry a knife or a gun to protect yourself. But I've talked to a lot of these young people, and I talk to them because I can see a young me there. And there's one thing that they all have in common. They're not studying for a PhD. They've got very little to lose, There's not much hope for them. So they just think this is survival.
So is that where you were as a teenager?
Yes, I mean...
In which case, you said so much has changed about this country. And we don't have the kind of overt racial abuse that we used to have to live with. The police won't be openly racist in the same way. In this sense, it sounds like not very much has changed. Or do you have a sense in which gangs and young people today are different to how it was when you were a kid?
On the whole, there wasn't so much death. I mean, I know it's a bit crude to count how many people are dying. But for example, we used to say, if you don't like a man, slash him, cut him. It wasn't kill him. We wanted we actually wanted them to live with the scar, But now I was talking to a kid. I do martial arts. I do kung fu, and I talked to a kid the other day about doing martial arts for discipline and self-control and self-defense. And he was like, "Why would I want to learn all that punching and kicking? And I could just get a gun and shoot them." That's the attitude. But I have to say that I'm going to hold back from calling names. But I've been to a couple of estates, one in Oxford, and a couple of others in Manchester, where they have a lot of gang crime, and it's all white kids. So it's not necessarily
it's
a
not
black
thing.
Yeah. It's been a lot's been happening in East London recently, but it's not just a black thing. It's when kids have no hope and they got nothing to lose. Not so long ago, I was in a shop, right? There's a little thing I buy. It's just a little gel I buy, right? Because it's something to do with sports. And I looked at the price of it, and it was so expensive. I thought, I'm going to nick it. I don't have to pay for this. It's so expensive. And I put it in my hand, and then as I was going to put it in my pocket, I thought, I can see the headline now. Rastafarian poet shoplifting. I'm just about to publish my autobiography. I really want to do that interview with Krishnan Guru-Murthy. All these things are kind of coming to me, I have a lot to lose. It's not worth it. It's happened to me the other day, a couple of months ago, that I almost got into a street fight with somebody I knew I could have put down. I went, what you got to lose? I said to him, what have you got to lose? What, if you got a job, the person didn't have a job. I said,
You got a lot to lose.
I've got a lot to lose, bro. If you think you've won, it's all right, you go. You know, a long time ago, this very station, Channel 4, asked me to do a poem about the riots in the 80s. And the commissioner said, can you write a poem about people, riot and why people riot? And I thought about it for a couple of days. And I wrote a poem and I said to them, look, I'm sorry, I didn't write the poem you wanted, but I wrote another poem. It's about people that don't riot. Because it goes, you don't riot if you have a nice job and a home to come home to at night. You just don't riot if you have a nice job and a home to come home to at night. You don't riot if you are well fed and unemployment doesn't pressure your head. You don't riot if you live in the city but you have a country cottage with a view so pretty. You don't riot. Riots happen too late, and that's South Africa. Britain is great. If you've got a lot to lose, and I have never spoken to any of these young people that have a great vision of what they want to do in life, that feel that they have something to wake up for in the morning. For them, it's about survival on the streets, and they will do whatever is necessary.
Right, but you created something to lose yourself at a young age, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
You created a vision of your future. You decided you wanted to leave the Midlands, go to London, be a poet. How did that happen? Where did it come from?
I used to have a gang of boys. They used to steal tools from cars when tools were valuable, and I used to sell them to garages. And we had like a territory, and it's a kind of unspoken rule what our territory was. And there's another gang of kids with their territory, and so on and so forth. Some of my gang went into the wrong territory, and somebody got shot, wounded, and somebody shot one of my guys, and somebody got killed. And then they would come looking for me. I'm lying in my bed in Northfield in Birmingham. I've got a gun underneath my pillow to protect me. There's a guy on the door keeping guard because they said they're coming for me. And I'm lying there and I'm listening to Marvin Gaye, a track, What's Going On. And I think about the teacher who said I'm going to end up dead or doing a life sentence. And I said, I'm no statistician, I can never say that word, mathematician or whatever it is. But the law of averages says that somewhere along the line, I am going to end up dead or doing a life sentence if I carry on like this. And I woke up the next morning and I said to them all, here's your money that I owe you. I'm off. I'm going to London. I'm going to follow that dream I had as an 8-year-old kid of being a poet. Some of them laughed. I went to my mother. I said, I'm going to London. She said, why are you going to London? I said, I'm going to London. I said to them, give me 2 years and you'll see me on television. And they laughed and they said, yeah, we'll see you on Crime Watch. You know, I think it was called Police 5-0 then. There was
Police 5.
Police 5, yeah. Now, I went to London. I got in this Ford Escort, drove to London, and I met another gang. I got involved in another gang. Gang of poets, painters, artists. A lot of them are household names now.
Does that make you then think about all these kids at the moment who are in gangs who you come across and think you can all get out, you can all pursue a dream, you can, if I did it, you can do it, or do you think actually you're the exception and they are the norm?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I would tell people there is a way out. I visit a lot of prisons and I go and talk about my work. And there has been a time a few years ago when I went into Brixton prison, and the governor said as I was walking in, there's a guy here that says he knows you. And I finished reading my poetry and this guy put his hand up and he says, do you remember me, Benjamin? And I looked and I couldn't quite remember him. And he said, come on, bro, you took me on my first burglary. Everybody just fell about laughing. I was like, don't say that. He said, it's true, man, you taught me. Now, we were talking afterwards And I said to him, what have you been doing with your life? And he said, oh, I've done 2 years in Wandsworth, 3 years in Pentonville. I was in Wormwood Scrubs for 6 months. And his life had been a tour of prisons. He asked me what I've been doing. I said, I've just finished a tour of Colombia. I've been working for 2 weeks in Delhi and now off to Tehran and blah, blah. And my life is just... And we went right back to a kind of conversation we had where he was just as talented as me, but I went one way and he went the other, you know? So I don't think we can all be famous novelists and whatever, but we can all do better. And if you're really low, you know, this, was it Oscar Wilde that said about looking to the stars? You know, you've got to look up, you've got to give yourself hope. And
we're all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars.
Yes, yeah.
We must leave it there. Benjamin Zephaniah, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Cool, man. Touch it.